Okay, we are live. Hello, hello, everybody, and especially Emma, who we are very impressed with for watching a whole film. We just watched, I'm sorry to hear this, we just watched Annihilation, the 2018 version. I think that's the only version. And it is a film that is based on a book. And I've watched it before, but it was Tish and Hannah's first time watching it. What did you guys think? What would you rate it out of 5?
I would give it a 4.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty solid for me, and the soundtrack was good.
Yeah.
The different kind of like eerie little noises were like scratching my brain in just the right way. I was like, "Ooh, I like this a lot."
I don't know what I feel like I want to discuss it first and then choose a rating, because there were things that I really liked about it and I thought were very, very clever, and other things where I was like, and now you're trying too hard. And like, I don't know where I sit on it. I don't know if I'm going to come out of this, because when I rate books, 3s are usually that was really well written, but I didn't massively enjoy it, or it was written terribly, but we had a great time.
Right.
And I feel like it's going to end up 3.5, maybe a 4.
Yeah.
But I also feel like maybe I'm being hypercritical, and actually once I've discussed it,
right,
and my brain has finally caught up, because I'll be honest, the Annihilation thing like did all its spangly stuff as the credits started, and I went, okay. Where, like, because I was like, there was just like there was a lot of foreshadowing,
right?
There were, like, things that were like set up, and then it just didn't feel like there was a lot of payoff, because the payoff is only like 2 seconds long, and I was like, I feel like I wanted another 20 minutes of film,
yeah,
to kind of like, just so I understood it, you know,
which is wild because it's already 2 hours, so you almost feel like certain things could have been shorter so that we could have got a little bit more towards the end.
That's fair.
I do feel like for 2 hours, I never feel like I felt it was 2 hours. I think often when I watch films, I'm like, okay, I know I've been here for a while, but this one I was just like, oh, and it's finished.
Yeah. I feel like they balanced it out really good. Like between the attacks, like, so you had action, and then you had like kind of an explanation, more exploring other characters, and then you had action again. And I think that's what made it easier for it to not feel like 2 hours, because it was like very balanced for me.
Thank you for those coat hangers. I was thinking about that when I was talking the other day.
You know, I walked in and I was like, it's giving Spider, which is apt. And then Emma was like, absolutely not. So I was like, I'll just get rid.
I appreciate all the people saying hi, even though they're not film people. Emma fully expected to not care about it and just turn it off or get too scared, but it was actually engaged and wasn't like, please hurry up. Yeah, it's a very balanced approach. So, other than the music and the like pacing of it, what did you like about it? Or what do you want answers for? Maybe that's more of a question.
About like what it was.
I feel like I want to go beat by beat and kind of like clarify some stuff, because I think there are some really interesting things. And do you remember last year when we watched like this really cute little animated film about the Addams Family? And like, do you remember the year before that where we watched like just a classic slasher, woman? Like, do you remember how easy those films were to discuss? Like, do you remember how like with the first one we were like, yeah, Final Girl, we love that, and then with the other side we were like, enjoyed it, not as good as the OG. And like with this one, I'm like, can we start at the beginning? Because like there was like, I was on your Twitter feed, you mentioned that you really liked that fractured structure, and I was like, okay, I know they're hinting at stuff and they're care yet, so like having that structure be so fractured at the beginning was great to kind of set up the pacing, because it was fractured like that the whole way throughout, so it was really consistent. But also, like, I didn't need the random flashes of her orgasming multiple times.
It felt kind of like out of the blue too, like it's an intense scene, and then all of a sudden I was like, what is okay.
So I really like the fact that the film starts with her discussing cancer cells and kind of talking about the reproduction of cancer cells, because I can't remember who it was, but this person on YouTube that does like film critique and film theory was talking about how the opening shot of any film will tell you exactly what this film is about. Yeah. Like any film, you can distill everything down to that opening shot. And her detachment from this thing that is a growth that is for her to study, but is also massively destructive. That's the film, right? We see that obviously the shimmer is going to become tumorous and represents cancer, and also like this self-destructive nature, and the fact that the whole way through she is just emotionally like not coping, like not dealing with it at all. So I really, really like that as like an opener. And I like the fact that the guy, like, it's very, very clear that there's clearly like that tension between her and Dan before we meet Kane, before we see what he's like as a person. And we don't get any flashbacks to their healthy relationship until we already know that she's done this bad thing. And it's also not what I really liked about the toxicity of the affair, which is a really weird thing to say anyway, but what I liked about that is the fact that we have two perspectives on it, because initially it's played off like you shouldn't be upset if you had an affair, your husband's been gone a really long time, switched up to, oh no, they were having the affair before he left for this mission. And actually, because they had the affair is why he was selected, that she is directly responsible. And that is foreshadowed when she says, I owed him. Because for what else does she owe him? She's the one that made the mistake. She broke it. She has to fix it. So like things like that, very clever. Really, really liked it. And I've been talking for a long time. So thoughts on any more I've discussed?
I was just gonna say, like, I've watched this film multiple times, and I've never really, I've read the book. Like, I read the book before I watched it, and the difference between the book and the film is that this film is abstract. The book is even more abstract with even less answers, and they put more narrative to this novel. Like, they put like all this romantic relationship stuff is not in the book. Like, she has a husband who's gone in, and that's kind of the beginning and end all. There's not really the affair discussed or any of that. So every time I watch it, I'm not focused on that at all. But you saying all of that, I was like, oh my gosh, I've never really looked at that affair relationship in depth, because I'm just like, they made this for the film. They made it to be a bit more narrative and give more understanding, which I think it does, which is helpful. If you haven't read the book, otherwise you'd just, I think, be lost in like the weird sciencey abstract gothicness of it.
It also helps with like why they would decide to go in there, because in most cases people are probably not going to be like, oh yeah, I'll definitely go, but given the circumstances that they were both in, it was like an automatic like, yeah, we're going in.
But also it's such an odd choice. Like, her husband comes back and he's clearly not well, and I know she can go in there to get answers. But the fact that she's like, I want to go in and get answers rather than be with him in case he dies, I'm just like...
It's foreshadowing the fact that she's already destroyed her relationship. She knows, because he's like really off with her. And like, it's one of those films where like, I feel like to really appreciate it, for it to go up in my estimation, I would need to watch it again. Because those opening scenes where she's like trying to coax answers out of him, she then gets defensive, which is classic cheater manipulation. Right? That kind of like, I can't get you on side, fine, I will go on the attack. And like, she does, like throughout the entire film, she is constantly defensive, she is constantly on the attack, and she is constantly manipulating everyone around her. So it's what makes it so ambiguous at the end. Is she still manipulating people because she's a clone, or is she manipulating people because that's just what she does to survive? Because fundamentally, she like... I like, again, the refraction theme, because it's the idea that obviously you're filtering something through, but you're getting something different. So like the opening scene where like he pulls his hand away, hers moves away slower. You can see that through the glass, it's swapped over. Like there's already that kind of setup for our perspective is going to shift. Things are going to be weird. We're just going to have to run with it because none of this is going to make sense. So like things like that, I think are really, really cool. And I think actually, I mean, I love Oscar Isaac anyway as an actor. I just think the way he played it so stoically would have been really, really hard, because that would have been should have been quite an emotional scene.
Right.
So to do detached and not make it look like you're just being a lazy actor, like that in itself is quite an achievement.
Yeah. I also felt like she went in there too because there was already a sense of detachment between him and her. So it's not that like him almost dying, she was like being there, but it felt more out of obligation than out of actually caring for him because of that, whatever it was that drove the rift between the two of them in the first place.
I agree. And I also like what you said about Oscar's acting being so like deadpan, like being so detached the whole time. I've seen Natalie Portman in a lot of things, and I feel like this was her best performance for me, because I think she managed to do that detachment as well, but also like clearly showing she does have emotions, but she's really struggling to access them, or they feel a bit performative in whatever she's doing at that moment.
I think it is a really strong performance. I still think Black Swan is her greatest performance ever. Like, you can never take that away from me.
That is solid.
Admittedly, she's one of the only redeeming things about the Star Wars prequels as well. So
really, okay. Well, that's a whole other discussion.
We could be here all day.
Yes.
But yeah, how do you feel about it being like an extraterrestrial thing? Like, how do you feel about it as opposed to, because a lot of the themes are like the nature and the mutations and stuff like that could be very kind of like eco-warrior centric. It could be very conservationist. It's obviously very conservation theme anyway,
right?
But how does it impact you as an audience, the fact that it's an extraterrestrial thing that has an arc? Like, it ends, I mean, like, obviously it has that ambiguity of, does it continue? You know, if they were to breed, do they breed more of these things, etc.? But as far as the world is concerned, if we didn't have that final scene of her meeting Oscar Isaac, it's over, right? The thing's gone.
Right.
And how do you feel? Because I feel like that for me was another detachment, not as like an audience thing, but kind of and they all lived happily ever after. Because it's extraterrestrial and not something. I guess the point I'm trying to make is, like, in The Last of Us, it's not extraterrestrial. It is something that has mutated and grown out of something Earth-based, and that makes it, to me, 10 times scarier than something that's come out. And I know I was watching some videos in our little like break bit between finishing it and talking, because I was like, what was that ending? Like, what am I missing? And apparently it was not the original ending. The original ending was actually going to be there were going to be multiple meteors arriving. The implication being that they are an alien race looking to invade. But then it wasn't ambiguous enough for the director, and he decided to cut that bit.
So I'm glad they didn't go with that, because it feels like a stereotypical ending to I mean, like, that's the way every alien movie ends, is them coming to take over the world. And I did appreciate that the extraterrestrial was not like anything you would see, and it didn't have like a motive. It almost seemed like it's like what it was doing is just naturally what it's supposed to do. And I feel like that's almost scarier, because it can just continue to change things, but almost not realize that it's like doing so, if that makes sense.
And I think also that ending that ending is very different. The alternative one is very different from the book. Like, even the book doesn't have the I thing ending. And I think I like that it, like, you're saying extraterrestrial, but I feel like it's also still in the question of whether it's extraterrestrial, because all the mutations are very based on like stuff that already exists that we have, and they've like grown and like changed and metamorphosized over time. And then she encounters this really alien creature, but it's still doing what she does until, like, it mimics her until it doesn't. And so it's like, is it us and it's who we are until a certain point where we snap, where we change, where we reach the end of our sanity? So it feels extraterrestrial, but at the same time, it also hints at like maybe it's not at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we're cannibalizing the world, which is very Eco-Warrior, as you said.
Right.
Yeah. No, I really like that as a kind of take on it, because I think that's it has to live in that grey area. For us to be speculating about it this much, it has to live in that grey area.
Right.
And that is that's going to raise it in my estimation. What I did like is the fact that it was a speculative fiction that did feel very gothic. The pacing was very slow. The themes were very dark. You had isolation. You had mental health issues. You know, everyone who went in there was traumatized in their own way and dealt with that trauma in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
All of that is very, very gothic. And I think to have a modern film filter that many gothic tropes and then still be like a Hollywood budget is really impressive.
Right.
Because I think, you know, that does tend to dilute stuff, having big producers kind of come in with money. I really, really like that. It was really funny. I think it was really interesting the cast they chose for the rest of the scientists.
Yes.
Because the person who played Anya, I've only seen her in like 3 things, and she character in everything. She is just the life and soul of the party.
Yeah.
Trying to be really until she loses her temper, and then like that's it. So watching her have this like badass fighting scene, I was like, okay, I like that. And then having again a character that I've only ever seen play badass characters play this very soft, very gentle physicist, and also the fact that the physicist talks less about physics than they did about philosophy. That was really interesting to me. Because like I think they were like, yeah, it's refractions, and that was their physicist thing ticked. Like, I
got it.
And now they were like, I'm going to channel Aristotle for the rest of my days. I liked that. It just felt like Cassie was there just for them to lose somebody. It didn't really feel like she had no emotional weight until the boat scene, which was a great scene. And again, another one from your Twitter list. But it felt like that was her sole purpose there, was just to be one lost, which kind of balanced out because she was the one face that I really didn't, well, other than Ventress, who I feel like I've seen in something, but I'm not entirely sure. She was the only actress that I was like, I don't know who she is. So I wasn't entirely surprised that she was the first one to go.
I think it's interesting. I don't know that much about the casting from other things other than Tessa Thompson. But I feel like it's interesting that, for example, Oscar Isaac, such a big name, but arguably he doesn't have that much screen time.
No.
And it feels like, other than the person who like died very quickly, they weren't really just giving the big people the big roles so you can predict what's going to happen based on who they are. It was like, this is actually the story and they're doing their jobs well.
Right. Because he held his own weight in all of his scenes. Like it's like he didn't even need more scenes because the small ones that he had, they were just done so well.
But then equally, was he a big name in 2018? That was a fair while ago. And you think like how quickly, like they call them shooting stars for a reason, right? Like how quickly you can make and break a career in Hollywood. He hadn't done Moon Knight yet.
No,
he hadn't. He'd only what I know he'd done Ex Machina, which is obviously by the same director. So it didn't really surprise me that he was like an antagonist in one and then potentially an antagonist in another.
Right.
I was like, clearly these guys like working together. Fine. But I don't know what else he'd been in.
Does this predate Star Wars?
Yeah, 2018. Yeah, I would have thought so. Let's have a look.
I don't know. I'm really bad at knowing when films came out.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a look at his IMDb.
The first time I'd ever seen him was in Sucker Punch, and I didn't realize that was him until after.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like,
oh my gosh,
that's like an in hindsight type thing. So okay, let's have a look. So he was in Star Wars Resistance. Maybe it was then. Oh no, I'm wrong. Star Wars Episode 8 was 2017.
2017.
Okay,
So
so
just
where
after?
he first was mainstream.
So I would argue, yeah. So 2015 was when Star Wars was released, the first one, the Force Awakens. Before that, he had done a bunch of films. Ex Machina is probably the most famous of these. A lot of these are shorts. He was in The Bourne Legacy, but as Outcome 3. He was in Drive as Standard. He was in Sucker Punch as Blue Jones. He was Prince John in Robin Hood. He was also in... Oh, that's what I've seen him in before. He's in Agora. He's Orestes. So he's like a bad guy in that as well. So he's antagonists mostly.
Yeah.
But Ex Machina is probably the one that is the most famous. After that, so he did Ex Machina was in 2014, and then Star Wars: The Force Awakens was 2015. I think it was probably that properly launched him.
Yeah,
because he did a few more shorts, but mainly Star Wars and Lego Star Wars, and then he did Annihilation. So this would have been straight after that. So he would have done Ex Machina, a bunch of other things, including Star Wars, and then gone straight into Annihilation, which was probably, with the budget they had and the amount of stuff they had going on, filmed, like a year, 2 years before it was ever seen. So if we assume that in 2017, Star Wars has come out, he's already been working on Annihilation.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, he was booked during that little time frame.
So he probably was on the rise. But even in that, he's as much as he's one of like the main characters in the second film, his storyline is so minimal in comparison to what the main crux of the film is. They've had to like Ryan Johnson really was just like, I'll just shove this in here anywhere, you know. And don't get me wrong, it's my favorite film, but for very different reasons. So I imagine his trajectory was probably on a very different scope. And same for Tessa Thompson, because if she was doing like Avengers and Men in Black and stuff, I feel like most of that would have been after Annihilation.
And she was doing the Creed movies too.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel like there's a lot there that's really interesting, like career-wise. But that's not what we're discussing. Back to Annihilation. I just it's a lot non-aggressive life forms.
The most aggressive ones, Annihilation.
But this is the thing: the bear only attacked once it had been attacked. So it attacks Cassie and drags Cassie out, but don't we hear a bang first?
I didn't think so.
Maybe I'm imagining.
I thought he just broke in. He broke into through the fence, and that's the bang that we hear.
Oh, okay. Maybe not then.
And also, it just makes me think about that horrible video where the intestines are moving, and then you see kind of the end result, and maybe that's not aggressive. Maybe that's trying to explore the human body. I don't know, but that's
that was wild. I thought there was something in there first until I clocked it. I was like, "Oh, that's his intestines moving."
Yeah. I was like, the moment he wasn't screaming when being sliced open, I was like, whatever it is, it's going to be gross. Yeah, it's going to be gross. It's going to be traumatizing. Yeah. What I thought was really convenient was the fact that Anya was like, "No, we imagined it. I'm not watching it again." And it's like, or we could be scientists about it, and reestablish the data. You know, like it was just kind of all right for convenience sake. Admittedly, I don't want to watch it over and over and over again. But
filming this and Star Wars in adjacent sets. It's the same film scenes for both on the same. That's trippy.
Oh my gosh, my brain would malfunction.
Yeah, that's such whiplash between characterization as well to switch on and off.
Considering one is like really kooky and fun and like energetic, and it's just like I may or may not be a plant. Like wild.
Maybe that made it easier because it's so starkly different that he's like, all right, I can't. There's no way to get these two mixed up.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about your scariest scenes because I think throughout watching this, that's the first time I watched, I wasn't that scared until it got to the point where the clone was copying her until she tried to escape and then it wouldn't copy her. and I have no idea why, but that just creeped me out.
It was the music. It was the music that added to that.
Room.
Like, yeah, that was eerie and really unpleasant. I don't know if it scared me. I think it caused me to ask questions. I think the bear scene was probably the most violent, and therefore, and also the fact that I keep going to call her by her actor name and not her character name, the physicist, when she's just like, we're just having a really nice and just like immediately like pulled out. I was like, oh, we're doing jump scares now. Great. I think that was like my initial, but I don't think I found it that scary. I feel like if I read the book and those things were happening, that would really creep me out.
Yeah.
But I think do you know what's really bizarre? I've heard that Annihilation sound out of context too many times. Because the moment it went brr, 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 and that thing like turned and looked at her, I was like, all right. It just felt a bit silly. The thing I found genuinely unsettling was the way it was crushing her body against the door.
Yeah.
Because I was like, is it going to go in her mouth that's open or her eyes that are open?
We're gonna like mold together eventually.
It was just weird.
Yeah.
And I also found it felt a little bit like, if I turned the sound off, would I find this as scary? Because some scenes you can turn the sound off and it is still just as terrifying, if not more so. And this one, I felt like if I turn the sound off, it would probably just look a bit silly.
Yeah.
Because she's like prowling around herself and like confronting herself and like punching herself and then getting knocked out, and like that final fall where her arms just kind of go as she goes
to her knees. Yeah.
I was like, okay.
I think the bear, when it's mimicking the screams, that was creepy. That was probably the creepiest to me, mainly because it felt and looked very much like what I think like Wendigos look like.
Yeah,
that's like when it creeped around the corner, like that's the first thought I had was like, this feels very Wendigo like. And then the mimics of the screams and being able to sound so much like a human, I was like, this is creepy.
Yeah.
When I first heard that, it actually immediately made me think of Hunger Games. I think it's 2, where there are birds that copy dead voices.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this reminds me of that.
And it's so like guttural too, because it's mimicking her screams, not just like her voice.
Yeah,
that was crazy.
Yeah, and it's also just the fact that it's just like, it's not even doing it as like help me. It will literally be like, help.
Yeah,
me. It was really gross. Fun fact though that I learned during our little break: the animatronic used to make the bear, they called Dexter behind the scenes.
No, it's cute. Dexter.
Right? His name was Dexter.
I'm glad they used like practical effects. That would
he was a silicone mask with mechanics inside.
That's good. I always like when they do that because, one, it just makes it so much easier for the actors to be able to look at something and replicate being scared instead of a green tennis ball and just imagining really hard what that's supposed to look like.
Tennis balls are terrifying. I think that if they'd had a game of tennis mid scene with the bear, I'd have passed out. Yeah, very different scene. Although more apt to this. Okay, so let's go back to the 2 random orgasm scenes. The first one is the moment she steps through the shimmer. And I don't know if you noticed, but the house they find in the middle of the field is her home.
It is?
Yeah. When you walk through, she walks into, because there's the picture on the wall, which I only noticed because it's what the cane guy walks in, looks up the stairs and looks at it, and you can see the rest of the house layout as he stood there. And then when they all walk in and they all wander in the different directions, she looks at the picture, the same picture. And obviously it's not the same picture because it's in a frame and there's like nothing in it.
Right.
It's the same house.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
To remember the house in the field. Wait, which house in the field? Oh, wait, is it the house where they are with the bear?
Potentially. Yes.
Where they find the plants shaped like people.
Yeah. Sorry, Emma's comment: vampire baseball versus bear tennis. But yes, you're right. It's the same house.
I will say one thing that I felt like bothered me was that they weren't being like careful enough.
No.
Yeah, I was just like, because like in the beginning when they get attacked by that crocodile and then they just like immediately get in the water, I was like, are we not like in the boat? I was like, are we not concerned that maybe there are more and they could flip the boats? And it kind of felt like that because then after the bear attack, they're going deeper into the woods. And I'm like, again, are we not concerned that there are multiple mutations? And like, why are we still trekking the same way and not being a little bit more cautious about it?
Also, the number of bullets it took to bring the alligator down or the bear down.
Yeah.
And then when they see the alien creature, she just like empties a clip. And you're just like, you know it doesn't work. You're a scientist, okay? You know that you have to do things multiple times, sure, to be sure. But you've shot that alligator, what, 30 times? For it to go down right into its face.
Mm.
And also, why are these plant aliens thickening their skins to the point that bullets can't penetrate them, but fire can?
Yeah.
It was things like that I was like, okay. And that's what brought it down for me, was like, if I'm thinking about it.
But how much fire have they encountered? Because they've encountered lots of bullets as an alien species. Because we know that they're not the first group to go in.
Yeah, but they also had those explosives that literally set stuff on fire. So you think
probably people have deployed those, yeah.
Like that's the thing is like again, I can't remember what it was, but I was watching like I love watching film critics and like commentators like tear films apart, even ones that I love, not in like a rip them apart because it's bad, but more just like dissect stuff. And there was this one where it is a really common theme where if it's like, well, if bullets don't work, fire will. Where were the gloves? Yeah. Do you know what? Yeah. Basic science. She's like scooping stuff up. Where's the gloves? Phosphorus grenades.
And like, why weren't they wearing anything like mask wise? Like you have somebody that came back from there and he's essentially dying of organ failure.
Yeah.
And your thought isn't maybe it gets in through the respiratory. We should wear a mask. We should do that.
I feel like at some point the film does touch on the fact that nearly all of them have a death wish.
Yeah.
Or are dying in some way. So I feel like safety is not their number one concern, but longevity to achieve their mission definitely is. So they should be doing the things that help them get that longevity.
And I feel like from an organization standpoint, you would think there are like safety precautions. Like 5 people shouldn't just get to decide like, well, I don't really want to make it out, so I'm going to go maskless. Like I feel like that would be not good for the operation as a whole.
And at the end, the people questioning her are in like full
hazmat suits,
everything, but they're not when they go in.
Intriguing.
Yeah.
Oh, I think overall, if I go back to the rating thing, I think overall it is a 4 stars. I think there's a lot for me to think about. I have every interest in watching it again to see if I can pinpoint more foreshadowing moments or anything like that. I think the themes are really interesting. Ironically, I think the main character was the least interesting thing about it. Like, I think Natalie Portman's performance was spectacular, but I didn't actually care about Lena at all. But then maybe you're not supposed to because there's so much going on around her and she doesn't really care about herself either.
Maybe I feel like that was like intentional. Like you were supposed to not care in the way that she doesn't care.
Yeah. So I think it is a good film. It's not gonna become a comfort film anytime soon.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's not an essay about it, but I don't think I'd be like, should we watch a film? Shall I stick Annihilation on? Like, whereas Ready or Not, Addams Family, every time.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, lots to think about. I'm really sorry, but Zach just missed his bus. So I need to go and save him because he's at some random bus stop in the dark. But I've really loved this chat and I will be coming back to watch the rest of this to see what else you discuss. But I need to disappear.
Okay.
That was valid. Tish, do you have more to discuss or are you good?
I'm fine. I still don't understand the ending as far as like because I don't know if she's normal or if she's a clone. So
I think it's going to be like an Inception level ending of like, is she?
I just feel like it's
she?
like my brain's going in a million different directions. So I'm like, well, it could be this, could be that, could be this. So
I think it is one to think about and rewatch eventually at some point.
Yes.
And I also just Emma commented this, and I will say another thing I liked about it was that it was women who were scientists going into this thing, and it wasn't about the men. Well, there were men involved, but it wasn't about the men. It was kind of nice.
Yeah. It passed the Bechdel test. They barely talked about men at all.
Yeah.
Like, heck yeah. That's why I'll be watching it again.
And to be fair, the only time they did discuss a man was to be like, he was your husband? He was crazy. So
we love to see it. Okay. Let's leave it there. I love this statement. And thanks for watching and for joining the watch along. I think the next sprints might be Hannah's tomorrow.
They are 7 p.m. Because I'm in the process of moving. So I am packing during the day, seeing my family, and then I'm sprinting because I want to finish some books. I am a third of the way through my second to last book, I think.
That's impressive.
Because I'm halfway through one, and I think I'll be able to finish one tomorrow. And then we've got like 4 days left, so I need to crack on with that last one.
Wonderful. Okay, so head over to Hannah's channel tomorrow, and thank you to those who discussed with us or hung out this evening. And we'll see you in the next one.